2 episodes ago, we had our friend, prominent yoga teacher Sean Korn, on the pod. She had joined forces with a group of wellness influencers to make a stand against the QAnon messaging that has been steadily growing in influence amongst that tribe. The social media post this group created went viral and ended up generating coverage from Rolling Stone, the New York Times, WNYC's On the Media, and other outlets. Several of those linked back to us, thank you, and used the term conspirituality to describe this phenomenon. That week, we were also guests on Jeff Krasno's Commune podcast. So if you're here because you follow Sean or Jeff, or you stumbled onto us via a link on a news site, welcome. We started this journey 19 weeks ago with some questions, some ideas, and a boatload of alarmed curiosity. What we have found via our own journalism, discussions, study, and interviews with experts has been by turns surprising, predictable, banal, fascinating, heartbreaking, and most often just plain mind-boggling. In the information age, misinformation is ubiquitous. As Jonathan Swift famously noted, falsehood flies, and the truth comes limping after. Never before has this been more the case, given the now total algorithmic balkanization of our social feeds and the prioritizing of clickbait sensationalism for driving online ad revenues. With everyone at home, anxious, resentful, and experiencing a once-in-a-lifetime level of mass uncertainty and enforced sacrifice, what has bubbled up to the surface of our collective psyche is very messy, to say the least. Like many just becoming aware of it lately, we started off asking what could turn light and love healers, compassion espousing yogis, and raw vegan female sexuality and empowerment coaches into evangelists for the gospel of Q. The posts, the videos, the live streams, COVID denial, 5G alarmism, vaccine paranoia, rejection of quarantine measures, insistence on the power of natural immunity over masks, and on supposedly channeled information about a coming global spiritual awakening. All of this seemed now to have dovetailed with an outlandish far-right narrative involving blood-drinking satanic pedophiles and a choose-your-own-adventure set of ever-evolving clues from the mysterious Q, who claimed to be a government insider with super-high intelligence clearance. The hero of Q's dark role-playing fantasy pantomime, you may ask? Why, Donald Trump, of course. But let's get one thing straight. Q is most likely not a single person. QAnon is not really a group or a political party. It's not a structured propaganda organization. This is much more akin to a very large online alternative reality game with ever-morphing rules, objectives, and tactics. As a movement dreamed up on message boards that celebrate trolling, cultural and institutional disruption seems to be their main product. And perhaps more than their overt allegiance to Trump, the chaos this creates is working in his favor. But listen, it may be an alternative reality game, but the stakes are high. So far, QAnon infection has led to 1 murder by firearm, 1 attempted vehicular murder, 1 woman stopped carrying knives trying to get close to Joe Biden after posting on social media that she was going to take him out, 3 custody-related kidnappings motivated by QAnon beliefs, 1 man stopped with explosives on his way to blow up a monument, a total of 8 arrests, including that of a man who, convinced erroneously that it was a child sex trafficking site, occupied a tower at a cement plant for 9 days while live streaming a video watched over 650,000 times. And another of a man who sat with a loaded AR-15 in an armored truck at the Hoover Dam, blocking traffic for 90 minutes. Of course, that list doesn't include the technically pre-Q Pizzagate debacle, in which a man named Edgar Welch stormed and then fired a weapon 3 times inside Comet Ping Pong Pizza in a frenzied attempt to free children he believed were being held captive in the basement by Hillary Clinton. The DC pizza joint, as it turns out, has no basement, and neither does Edgar Welch's current prison cell. Despite being officially declared a domestic terrorism threat by the FBI, as we approach the election, there are at least 23 candidates for state legislature who have endorsed or given credence to QAnon. If you're in the wellness subculture, the trends, going back a few months now, became clear. It started with posts flooding your feed, first about 5G, then about propaganda documentary Plandemic, then maybe about vaccines, then about sovereign freedom and quarantine as laying the groundwork for tyranny, then about child sex trafficking. These trends went in waves, but woven through all of it is the ever-present villain, Bill Gates. Bill Gates wants to microchip the world for tracking and control. He wants to depopulate the planet. He's going to make even more money off a poisonous vaccine. We never voted for him, or Fauci for that matter, and besides, Gates predicted all of this in a TED Talk. Look into it, man. Obama predicted 5 years ago as at the pandemic happening right around now. How do you explain that? Unlike predictions based on early warning signals about pandemics, Q's frequent prophecies usually don't come true. But believers endlessly reinterpret, keeping faith with a mystery beyond mere logical understanding that will be revealed when the Great Awakening arrives. So this is perhaps what we have learned. This is perhaps where what we have learned starts to emerge. The overlap between a New Age mindset and this particular crop of conspiracy theories is fairly straightforward. The term conspirituality first appeared academically in the title of a 2011 paper, The Emergence of Conspirituality. Published in the Journal of Contemporary Religion, authors Ward and Voash talked about a synergy between the evergreen conspiracy claim that a covert group is controlling or seeking to control the world, and the New Age notion that humanity is undergoing a paradigm shift in consciousness. Once combined, the narrative that this shift in consciousness can help overthrow or thwart the new world order of dark conspiratorial forces is set. This overlap is perhaps defined by these three familiar tenets. Nothing happens by accident, nothing is as it seems, and everything is connected. We have noted, too, that the spiritual community has long been in training for some juicy conspirituality, well practiced in rejecting critical thinking and science, convinced that part of waking up is seeking out hidden synchronistic patterns as messages from the universe, and invested in forms of spiritual bypass that include avoidance of facing trauma, injustice, or dealing honestly with painful emotions, grandiose fantasies about in-group specialness and importance, and black and white thinking about who is chosen to awaken and who, on the other hand, is part of the unconscious, unwashed masses. Lack of well-integrated, healthy skepticism around spiritual beliefs and assessment of gurus also means that as the faux skepticism of overstimulating, salacious, and gruesome mythology sets in, the same kind of messianic emotional investment short-circuits any rational analysis that should quickly debunk it. But conspirituality has a leadership and marketing style that reenacts the charismatic performance around which cultish dynamics flourish, looking almost exactly like successful toxic yoga groups. Like those cults, these new groups foster the strange paralysis of disorganized attachment, which works by alternating between offering a safe haven and scaring members into dependence. They're also very good at what Matthew describes as disaster spirituality, with a nod to Naomi Klein, the skill to capitalize on any moment of cultural instability. Hey, there's a crisis and we're suffering. Now is a great time to purchase our content of complete spiritual transformation. But beyond this merely cognitive critique, we started to discover that there were important, deeper layers to consider. Theo Wildcroft and Jacqueline Antonovich helped us consider how people who have legitimately felt let down by institutions, brushed aside by an impersonal medical model, and failed by those who they thought were protectors who would help them find justice, healing, equality, even happiness, may gravitate toward conspiracy theories. Deserved mistrust towards pharmaceutical companies or corrupted science or politicians that either reinforce traumatic associations with power or never simply follow through on promises to advocate for their needs all feed into a paranoid mood that rides on a set of unaddressed emotions and injustices. But the underpinnings of New Age spirituality don't get off so easy. The privileged opting out of politics in favor of a kind of fanciful non-dual oneness, posturing as above the fray, has perpetuated unconscious racism, entitlement, and a genuine confusion on the difference between far-right libertarian ideas and progressive principles that fit better with values of compassion and mindfulness. Spiritual superiority wants to stand up as beyond fear and possessed of super immunity via mind over matter or superfood supplements over pesky viruses, but also perhaps attuned to a higher cosmic purpose behind all this seeming chaos. Giovanna Hyman helped us look at the shadow of unacknowledged ableism in communities obsessed with health and well-being, sickness, as proof of spiritual inferiority. For some conspiritualists, if it is not merely a hoax with over-reported numbers, then COVID death is a kind of culling of the herd or a doorway into the supposed fifth dimension already emerging on our plane of reality. The libertarian entrepreneurial aspects of wellness culture and create your own reality fantasies are also fairly frisky kissing cousins of right-wing prosperity gospel bootstrapping. Then there are the big-name influencers, all previously somewhat apolitical, benign, but now catching on to how the algorithms drive massive jumps in views, comments, likes, website traffic, and no doubt, sales. From Zach Bush to Christiane Northrup to Charles Eisenstein and J.P. Sears, Danielle Laporte, even David Avocado Wolf. Rejection of the mainstream narrative and delusions or even outright references, and allusions or even outright references to Q buzzwords became more prevalent. Only now, using appeals to humor, open-minded philosophical sophistication, a return to nature, saving the children, and even feminism. We talked with cult expert Steve Hassan about Trump supporters and Q followers and found his wise advice to stay emotionally connected with people you care about who may have gotten sucked in. Be patient. Don't debate. Keep it personal and kind, and wait for the intoxication to run its course. We talked to head of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, Imran Ahmed, who assured us the best thing to do is ignore, block, and move on from social media posts spreading misinformation. Post your own accurate information instead, and don't boost their signal by engaging. We talked with Reagan Williams on how the very real issue of child sex trafficking is being weaponized in ways that actually not only interfere with legitimate organizations like her own, but do harm to survivors who are tragically vulnerable to conspiracy narratives. Drop the Q rhetoric and support people doing the work on the ground. But the cracks in our collective psyche continue. We talked to Lauren and Leanna about trusted shamans preaching Q prophecy to groups emerging out of their ayahuasca trips. And we watched as Conspirituality power couple Sayer G and Kelly Brogan not only decried masks as signs of submission and vaccines as an unnecessary evil, but as former psychiatrist Brogan promoted dangerously unsupervised discontinuation of psych meds, which she labeled as being like rat poison. John Rulak shared with us about longtime colleagues and friends from the sustainable food space getting red-pilled, and Jared Yates Sexton reminded us that in some ways the figures who built the myth of America itself were nourished on the empty calories of conspiracy theories all along. Jules Evans traced the long-standing history of right-wing and even Nazi fascination with New Age beliefs and practices. Turns out, this is nothing new. So that's the journey so far. We have no neat and tidy conclusions for you, just that truth matters and reality exists. Kindness has never been more valuable, and if there is one spiritual opportunity in this crisis, it might be that there is plenty of get your hands dirty work to be done using the tools and intentions of awareness practice to face the shadow of yoga and wellness culture. But in the meantime, folks, buckle up. The next 3 months are definitely going to be wild.